and I want to talk about recovery from emotional addiction. So I've never had a substance dependency of which I'm aware. I've never touched alcohol except like the briefest, smallest amounts because I've always known that I had an addictive personality. Even like when I was 14 years of age, I knew I had an addictive personality, even though I didn't really have a clue what having an addictive personality meant. I just realized that I should stay away from alcohol and stay away from drugs. And that's how I've conducted my life. I've been absolutely scrupulous to stay away from those things. But fortunately, being crippled by various emotional addictions or process addictions. And I want to talk a little bit about my journey and how I found some recovery. So in 1997, I started writing a blog on the pornography industry. It was then located at lukeford.com, and I found I could make a living from doing that. And so I was glad to quit my temp jobs and just write full time. But it put me in a lot of very dangerous situations. It wasn't being immersed in the pornography industry was not exactly suited for my well-being. So my family, who were all in Australia, grew concerned, and in early 2000, they offered me a free plane ride home if I would simply consult doctors of their choice. I said, absolutely, signed off on it. And so in around, I think, March 15th, I flew back to Australia in the year 2000. One of the doctors I saw was a psychiatrist, and I spent 3 hours with her. And she came back and gave these notes to a family member who then gave them to me. And when I read them, I immediately recognized the truth of my psychiatric report. It struck me as 80% true, 90% true, but I wasn't going to argue with it. So according to the psychiatrist, applying the DSM-4, I had a personality disorder of the histrionic and narcissistic type. So I was very dependent upon other people for my identity as a person. I had poor identity integration, poor self-esteem. So I'm always looking for mirroring. It's called narcissistic supply. So I'm always looking for external validation of myself as a person. I need other people to tell me who I am. And that struck me as just painfully true. So that's why I like being famous and being a blogger and being on TV and being in newspapers and written about in magazines and being in Rolling Stone and 60 Minutes and Entertainment Tonight. So because it's not possible for other people to mirror me all the time, I get disappointed, and this can turn to envy. So I'm not conscious of the fact that I'm very envious of my family because they have things that I would like to have but do not have. And this leads me to fluctuating between, on the one hand, valuing people such as my family, putting them down. On the other hand, idealizing people such as Dennis Prager, the radio talk show host. So Luke tends to make unreasonable demands of people who are eventually driven to setting limits on him. Luke takes this very badly. Again, I recognized the truth of every word of this report so far. Luke needs 5 to 10 years of insight-oriented psychotherapy. It was the falling out with Dennis Prager at the end of 1997, which caused him to go to therapy. While Luke has a lot of therapy speak, he may not really understand the concepts involved. So Luke's therapist did well to keep him in therapy for 15 months. That is unusual for someone with Luke's condition, as such people often leave off therapy when it becomes too confronting. Yeah, I didn't like being confronted. Luke will not continue therapy that is confrontational, particularly in the early stages. So pretty much everything so far I completely admitted was true. Luke will continue to do what he is doing to satisfy his needs until such time as the rewards, reinforcement, are outweighed by the negative effects of the same. And so it was kind of like this much of the time that I kept wanting to get out of writing on the porn industry and doing something else, but I couldn't quite figure it out. And so I was like, he may do something about getting his life on track and getting therapy or going back to finish his degree. Then he may do those things once the negative effects of being stuck in the porn jungle kind of outweigh the narcissistic supply that I was getting from writing a gossip column about the porn industry. So the negative effects of his current behavior are that no one will have a long-term relationship with him, as no matter how sane they are, people cannot live without getting something back Ouch. And Luke is always taking in without giving anything back. Second, any decent woman who looked at his website would be immediately repulsed. So Luke has a complicated personality. He has mood instability, perhaps mild cyclothymia. Luke becomes very focused on one thing, then when he's not getting the desired rewards, he drops it and moves on. Luke may have had some post-viral illness in 1988-89, but then the illness took on a life of its own. It's common for people to retreat into the sick role because it is his way of failing in a face-saving way. Luke was failing because of the lack of significant relationships in his life. Particularly recognize the truth of that last sentence. Luke is failing because of the lack of significant relationships in my life. Luke in his current state would not be successful in employment. He wants immediate results, and if he does not get them, he does not want a bar of it. Does not have a bipolar condition. As with most adolescent boys, Luke was obsessed with sex. As with most superegos, it's not well integrated. His rules are situational, and he justifies things. Luke is capable of being exploitive. Luke is reacting to the values of his family unit. He's not really interested in what psychiatrist thinks of him. He's only here to enjoy the trip. Luke's family have to set firm boundaries where we go in his life. We should stay off his website. What we do not know won't hurt us. We should set limits on his unreasonable behavior. We must treat him as an adult that he is and stop babying him. Luke has tunnel vision, difficulty seeing things as others see it. He is only looking for mirroring. He has just demonstrated the capacity to, at times, not put his immediate gratification ahead of everything else. For instance, he took some things off his website when requested by people close to him. He respected those involved. He did not want to lose a relationship with them. So Luke has the capacity to learn from his experiences. Luke has a poor sense of identity. He is not well integrated. He has no sense of self. Therefore, he's very changeable in different circumstances. That really struck me because I kind of noticed that I was like a completely different person in completely different situations. I just like radically change. So I got this in March or April of 2000, and I realized, okay, I need to get some help. So I went back to psychotherapy, and I had about 10 years of psychotherapy. And I think that reduced my self-destructiveness, and I'm sure there are some other positive benefits, but my life wasn't taking off. So I think it was in 2011, I was taking a writing class, and just because I wanted to write on this topic, and so anything that would get me writing, I would explore. So I decided to write, what do I want out of my sex life? Now let me be more specific. It was nastier than that. It was like, what are the most erotic things in the world for me? And I wrote down two scenarios that both involved, subtle degradation of women. I'm not into whips, chains, S&M, anything like that. It was just, kind of subtly exerting my power over women. And I noticed that all my sexual fantasies were about having power. And I remember that I had a previous girlfriend that all her sexual fantasies were about not having power. That's because she was really successful in real life while I was not successful in real life. So she felt the burden of responsibility in real life, so she wanted to lose it all in sex, while I was struggling in real life, wanted to feel like the master and commander in the bedroom to compensate for my failures in day-to-day living. So I was reading this to my therapist, and he said, this sounds like eroticized rage. And I immediately went home and Googled the term, and I saw that it was a symptom of sex addiction. So, but I didn't think it was like, I didn't think of myself as a sex addict because I've never masturbated in public. I've never exposed myself in public. I've never committed any sex crimes. Never even gotten close to doing any of these things. I wouldn't like leave work to go have a sexual liaison or so like the grosser aspects of sexual addiction. Just I'd say that's not me. I'm nothing like that. So I did see that I had problems with relationships. and I couldn't seem to sustain them for longer than about a year. And not just like romantic relationships, but I was just kind of lonely, and there was just something broken in the way I was trying to connect with other people. And so this is 2011, so I'm 45 years old by now, coming up on 45 years of age. And my life wasn't working, so I said, okay, let me try a 12-step program focused on relationships. And from the very first time that I went to a 12-step meeting, I immediately felt a sense of sobriety. Like I could identify with what everybody in the room was sharing. Like everybody would share at least one thing that spoke to me. And then afterwards, there were a couple of guys that went out in the parking lot and talked to more. And one of them actually had read about me or seen me on TV. And I really hit it off with these two gentlemen. And I told them, look, I'm a self-help junkie. I'm always looking to improve myself. And the speaker that day said, well, this isn't self-help. This is a life of service. And this is about transcending the self. So I thought, okay, I'll definitely give it a shot. And so I kept going back because I noticed a sobering effect on how I felt. I kind of felt balanced and in reality and not fantasizing as much. And then when I got out of the meetings, like even my fantasy life was being changed by the effect of going to meetings. Like my fantasies were no longer as cruel, as manipulative, as exploitive. They weren't centered as much about me having, all this awesome degree of power over the fairer sex. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Even my fantasies are changing. And as I go through the day, I just felt a greater sense of calm and an increased sense of freedom. So after about a year of the program, I decided, okay, it's time to start working the 12 steps. And the first one kind of threw me because the first step is I admitted that my life had become unmanageable. And that took me years of program to accept. Because though I was really thrilled with my life, I was really happy with my life, it never occurred to me until now to go to a 12-step program because I thought such programs were for the weak-willed, and I didn't think I was weak-willed. I thought there's nothing I did that I could not control. I felt like I was the master of my destiny. And one of the ways that I exhibited this is from the very earliest times in my life, I developed these bottom line behaviors that I would just completely avoid. So I didn't call them bottom line behaviors, but I knew there were things that I shouldn't touch. That I should never touch alcohol. I should never touch drugs. I should never, have sex with a married woman. They're just like basic moral boundaries that I, nothing ever illegal. I should stay away from that because there were boys in my school who were like sexually experimenting with each other, and I'm not even sure that they grew up to be homosexual. They probably grew up to be heterosexual, but they were just horny and experimenting, and I wanted to stay far away from that. And looking back now, I just see that I was just kind of managing my emotional addictions. Through most of my life, I felt this keen need for God because I always kind of had this sense that left to my own devices, I would absolutely destroy myself. And eventually, at age 27, I converted to Judaism, and I thought this would be a way to kind of get a handle on my self-destructive impulses and my sexual compulsions in particular. And I got very religious when I got into Judaism. I wouldn't even shake hands with women. I was so like lonely for physical contact that I would hug trees. Instead of hugging women, I would hug trees. And I completely abstained from masturbation. I found these old pornography magazines that I'd hidden under my parents' home, and I went and burned them. And so I stayed away from porn, and I stayed away from any sexual contact or any physical contact with women. And I just tried to lead a holy life. And that lasted for about 2 years. Then I met this woman who was very voluptuous, and I just all my discipline went away, and then I was just off to the races. I feel like there's something there's something about the second woman you're ever with, because when you're just with one, you can kind of see how you just can just be with her for the rest of your life. It's such like an intimate thing that you're doing that you don't want to, you don't want to take it outside of what you've got with this woman. But then once I slept with my second woman, then like sex became a sport. And then I was just like off to the races and just wanted to sleep with more and more women. And could never sustain a relationship longer than for about a year. And one way that I tried to deal with my sexual demons was that I thought, oh, I'll go write about the pornography industry. And I found the porn industry much of the time just like so repulsive that it kind of kept my own sexual demons in check. I liked many of the people in it. I enjoyed hanging out with them. And there were certainly scenarios and occasions that I found the industry erotic, but overall I found it repulsive. And I was so repulsed by it, it kind of kept my own sexual demons in check. But when I left the porn industry in 2007, my demons came back. And 2009, 2010, I had what I regard as my best relationship ever, but didn't last beyond a year. Much of the time I was idealizing somebody who wasn't really there. And then I was blaming her for not living up to my projections. I obsessed about her and I became dependent on her. And in the end, I was just weak and she moved on. So step one is just a clear declaration of something that I've known pretty clearly most of my life, certainly since age 22, that the way I'm doing things just doesn't work, and that my addictions to romantic and sexual obsession in particular were just warping my practice of religion, my choice of profession, the way I was interacting with people. And I kind of noticed that my emotional addictions would keep shifting, so that when I felt very lonely, even if I was off porn, I'd go on Facebook and write really inflammatory posts to try to get reactions, trying to get that narcissistic supply. I'd make some provocative status update to get attention. And it was kind of my substitute for pornography. Like I used to feel most alive when I was looking at porn, and then like posting on Facebook and like stirring things up would make me feel really alive. And I was stuck in these two different types of romantic relationships. Like one would be with these very loving but pathetic and irresponsible girls who would be an absolute millstone around my neck if I tried to schlep them with me through life. And then I also had a thing for these really high achieving women who quickly developed such contempt for me. And they would often say, I don't think I would be with you except I'm so depressed. So just the way I was living did not work. Now, once I got into a 12-step program, I looked at step one, admitting that I've got a problem. I go, oh, okay. Because I wasn't doing anything illegal. Then step two is I accepted a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. Like, okay, that didn't really mean a great deal to me then, because I believed in God most of my life, and yeah, I'm sure that God, knows best. I remember for a few years when I was an atheist, I had these bosses in landscaping who were Pentecostal Christians, and they thought that I acted like a good Christian, and they couldn't understand my atheism. And I told them, well, I want to do what I want to do in life, and I do not want to subordinate myself to God. And so I've always kind of been in rebellion against being told what to do. I think most people relate to God the same way they relate to their father, and so I've somewhat of a distant relationship with my father, and I've always had somewhat of a distant relationship with God. But by age 22, I realized my own inclinations would absolutely destroy me. I have to accept the dictates of some organized religion, and I just have to find the right one. And I chose Judaism because it made the most sense to me. And came to see God as like the only ends that you can pursue without limiting yourself, without worshiping an idol. And I noticed that most of the religious people around me, whether they were Jewish or Christian, they didn't have the problems that I do. Most of my problems would just spring from my selfish desire to do what I want, screw what I want. I see this also in movies and TV. When characters don't have some transcendental purpose, they're likely to destroy themselves. It's like pursuing their own desires. while people who have transcendent purpose, that often enables them to transcend their self-destructive impulses. So I've always been able to look around at godly people, see what a God-centered life can achieve. And so I wanted that kind of authentic human connection that I saw among religious people. Now, psychotherapy helped me with human connection. I saw how I'd been needlessly cutting people out of my life because I don't like to negotiate relationships. I don't like to bargain. I don't like to reveal my emotions. I don't like to talk things out. So my whole life had kind of been working across purposes, porn versus Torah, God versus atheism. By accepting the God as power greater than myself who can restore me to sanity, then okay, I'll go along with that. So step 3 of the 12 steps was I decided to turn my life and my will over to God. And that was one of the big blocks to me taking the 12 steps seriously, like turning my life over to God, because that sounds so Christian. But, I tried changing religions, I tried changing locations, changing professions, changing girlfriends, and my demons were not diminished. My addictions have so perverted my life that I have to kind of empty myself of my own self-will and let go and let God, even if that does sound Christian. And it's so humbling in my old age to kind of come back to this idea that had been preached throughout my childhood by my preacher daddy. So I think by the actuarial tables, I'm definitely closer to death than to my birth. So, okay, I'm willing now to turn my life and my will over to God. So I can use my prayer time to ask God to help me stay free of addictive behavior. And I have a problem with just saying prayers by rote. So I would experiment with actually trying to talk to God about what I'm battling. Now I've always kind of used people to satisfy my addictive needs for attention, narcissistic supply. I'm kind of have a history of using and manipulating people, and I can't simply will myself not to do that. So it's like my therapist told me that she has this image of me just, anytime I find a breast, I just try to suck it dry. Get every drop I can right now. So I've pretty much just used everybody I've known. And one of my favorite ways of manipulating people, I tell them, oh, you changed my life, man. You changed my life for the good. And I would kind of make them want to adopt me. Let them feel like they'd made a positive impact on me. And then I'd let them buy me dinner. So I didn't take super seriously any of the first 3 steps, my first time through the 12 steps. But wow, when I bought the program book for my 12-step program and started studying it and got to step 4, wow, that's when my life really changed, because it asks you to list off the people that you resent. And I had a long list of people that I resented. I had women who'd embarrassed me or humiliated me or cheated on me. So bosses who'd fired me or abused me, I felt like, they yelled at me too much, or synagogues, rabbis who didn't treat me with respect. I had some resentment against my parents, and I resented life for crippling me with chronic fatigue syndrome. I resented pornographers who threatened my life and beat me up. I had a lot of resentment. And so in column 1, I just go straight down. I just list off everybody, every community that I resented. There's a long list. And then in column 2, I would list why I resented them, how they negatively affected my life, how they hurt my self-esteem, my sex relations, my social status, my pocketbook, my feeling of safety in the world, how they humiliated me. What had they done that caused me to resent them? And then column 3, I got very clear what part of my life was it that they affected. Was it my sex life, my social life, my love life, my pocketbook, my fears, my social standing, where had they threatened my basic instincts? And then in the next column, I listed, fourth column, where had I been responsible? And so I saw now that my resentment had been steadily narrowed. First of all, by just getting clear about what they'd done that I resented, that helped to narrow my resentment. Then getting clear about what part of my life it affected, that narrowed the resentment even more. And then when I started writing what role I had played, and almost always I played a role. I had let my basic instincts run wild, and to fulfill my basic instincts for sex or love or social connection or status or money. I'd broken boundaries, and that had caused people to retaliate. And so in the fifth step, in the fifth column, I wrote out what I should have done instead. I should have been, instead of dishonest, I should have been honest. Instead of self-seeking, I should have been altruistic. Instead of being inconsiderate, I should have been considerate of others. I should have taken them into my consequences, like what will be the consequences of what I'm about to do on other people. So instead of being so frightened and fearful, I could have been fearless, because I could have believed that God was on my side. Instead of lacking self-discipline and self-control, I could have been disciplined and controlled. And instead of playing God and trying to control others, I could accept other people have their own reality. And instead of being self-centered and egocentric, I can be other-directed. So I was recently doing this work again, and I was working like a harms inventory where I just listed out everybody that I've ever harmed, and had about 70 entries. And this is how it would work out. So I'd list what I did. So for example, in I think like second grade, I had this guy who'd and his wife, they looked after me for a few months when my mother was dying of cancer. He was the dean at Avondale College, and I was hanging out with him, and I just took this pin just because I was curious. I just like stuck him with it. Like I would have hated it if anyone had done that to me, but I just kind of wanted to see what would happen. And like it was just this like careless cruelty of doing things to other people that I would have hated them to do to me. Another time, when I was 16, and this older woman was kind of house sitting. My parents were gone, and so she stayed with me at my parents' home. And just before my parents came back, she was doing this major cleanup. So she was cleaning the bathroom, she was cleaning the toilet. Like I went to the sink and dropped a firecracker in it, and it blew. It exploded, and it was just so loud, and just like frightened her to death. And she would never ever again stay with me. And what's so sad is this woman ended up dying. She was staying with her daughter, and there was a propane explosion, and that completely killed this old lady. So column one in the harms inventory, I'd list off who I harmed, what did I do or fail to do, and then what part of myself caused the harm. Was I acting out of self-will? Almost always. Wasn't willing to take direction from a higher power or from wiser people than me. Was I acting out of ego? Yeah. Put myself forward. Was I trying to make myself feel emotionally secure? Yeah. Was I trying to fill my pocketbook? Yeah. Was I acting out of pride, defiance, and independence? Yeah, much of the time. Was I acting out of self-pity? I deserve this. I've suffered so much, I should get some. Was I acting out of self-reliance? I know best, I don't need to get advice. Yeah. Was I trying to build personal relationships at at the expense of other priorities? Was I trying to make myself someone of greater social status? Was I trying to satisfy my sexual desires? And then I got clear about what was the nature of my wrongs. Was I being selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, inconsiderate, frightened and fearful, lacking self-control, trying to control others, and being self-centered and egocentric? So usually it's all of these. And then what should I have done instead? In almost all cases, instead of being selfish, I should have been selfless. Instead of being self-seeking, I should have been altruistic. Instead of being dishonest, I should have been honest. Instead of being inconsiderate, I should have been considerate. Instead of being frightened, I should have been fearless. And so now I've got the assignment from my sponsor. So step 6 is the principle of step 6 is willingness. And so I looked that up online as the quality or state of being prepared to do something. It is readiness. And so I've got the assignment, how have my character defects ruined my life? I was just journaling on that. How has selfishness ruined my life? I always just wanted what I wanted, and I didn't take into consideration the effect of my choices on other people. So, I wanted sex, so I chose damaged women. Like almost every sexual partner I've had has had a father who was a sex addict. So they were damaged by having fathers who were sex addicts, and they would seek to replay their traumas as I was trying to replay my traumas. And so I was hooking out with a lot of very damaged women, and I went down market because I wanted, the easy way out, and I just kind of had a sense for when women were vulnerable. So, I lucked out on the possibility of having a true partnership. I wasted time with women that I would never marry. And I was just selfish. I was just trying to, always do what I want to get what I want to get off, and get my self-esteem, stroked by dating a beautiful woman. And so I'm sure a lot of possible friendships and possible marriage or lasting romantic relationship and business opportunities have not been available to me because I'm just so selfish, and that was just obvious to other people, and so they stayed clear because everybody's saying wants to stay clear of selfish people. So my selfishness kind of reduced my chances of making genuine connections and fulfilling connections with other people and with community and with work and with investments and with my career. So my selfishness created a very isolated life. It reduced the number of people who wanted to connect with me. And when I was a kid, sometimes nobody wanted to play with me. Nobody invited me to their parties at times because I was just such a selfish jerk. And then the self-seeking character defect, that's just being insatiable for attention, so that I try to manipulate every social gathering or every conversation to bring it back to me. And that's exhausting. People get exhausted by that. My constant need for mirroring and narcissistic supply, and again, that cost me opportunities of genuine connection. So my dishonesty also hurt my reputation, caused people to shy away from me. People kept me at arm's length. I lost credibility with people, and again, I lost the possibility of genuine connection. So this evening, I'm just going to keep writing here on how my basic character defects of selfishness, self-seeking, dishonesty, inconsideration, fearful, lack of self-control, trying to control other people, and being egocentric, how that has ruined my life. So I want to check out the chat room here. And so, wow, there's some great conversations going on here. So yeah, some great conversations going on, and the utility of needing a religion, yeah, is obviously an argument from the utility of religion. And Zed says, I'm an odd female. I don't like most female things, but I love men. Yeah, that's interesting. Wow, she used to play a lot of video games when she was younger. Not many girls do that. So role playing, adventure, action fighting, gun fu. I was what you'd call a tomboy. My first vehicle was a motorcycle. Wow, what is NPD? That's narcissistic personality disorder. And Zev says, I think Luke just doesn't want to control his passions. Well, who does want to control his passions? Now, normal, healthy people, I'd say like at least half of the population, they realize that by not controlling their passions, that will ruin their lives, will isolate them and cause people to shy away from them. So I think at least half the population who has what's called secure attachment, realize that how self-defeating it is to allow your passions to run you rather than you running your passions. Zed says, this is a tough subject for me. I lost many family members to substance abuse. A lot of high IQ, mentally ill people in my family. Ouch. Luke is pretty much admitting to being a user. Doesn't mind that Judaism can potentially destroy people's lives. It's very Machiavellian. I have never smoked weed. Never, ever. I completely stayed away from all drugs and all alcohol. So Zev says, Luke is obsessed with honor. Yeah, I guess I do. Yeah, I absolutely hate weed, hate marijuana, hate drugs. Zed says, honor, the desire for honor manifests in judgment, my need to fulfill my roles as leader, caretaker, success, self-mastery. Yeah, so that can be, we have these museum states, and for me, it was kind of the less thaner. I always kind of felt less than, so I was chasing attention. I was trying to put myself forward to try to make myself feel whole because I felt less than. I was a crumaholic. I was kind of addicted to believing that I only deserved a crumb of what was good in life. The struggleaholic. I was also a struggleaholic. Everything has to be painful. Everything good has to be a struggle. So those are three museum states, and we are the curators of these museum states. And even though we develop them in childhood, we keep bringing them back because they're familiar. It's what we know. So there's struggleaholic, crumaholic, less thaner. These are chronic museum states for many people. And then there's another one that I have to take care of everyone else and put their needs before me. And the program for people like that is something like Al-Anon. Because people like that who like to take care of other people, they often tend to marry addicts or narcissists such as myself. And so I've had a lot of girlfriends who are caretakers, and they loved how arrogant I was and how narcissistic I was. It was kind of exciting for them at first, though over time it would wear them down. Luke denies the paranormal experiences of leading ultra-Orthodox rabbis. I don't know if I deny them. I'm not going to deny them. I'm not going to preach them. I'm not going to base my life on these purported paranormal experiences of leading ultra-Orthodox rabbis. He also accused them of making up stories. Yeah, well, many rabbis do make up stories to try to teach a moral point. They think it's okay to lie to teach a moral point. It's okay to lie if it's for a Torah cause, if it's for a good cause. And so count me skeptical. Zed says, I've been having these otherworldly spiritual experiences since I was a child. God was my best friend as a child. That's wonderful. And Zev says, I cannot fathom the fact that these leading ultra-Orthodox rabbis are not telling the truth. Well, I think most ultra-Orthodox rabbis, would feel that it's okay to stretch the truth if you're doing it for a Torah cause, if you're doing it for a good cause. So Shoshana says, please, you are never interested in married women. That is endemic among the Haredim. No, I've always stayed away from married women. I've always stayed away from like anything illegal, anything underage. Just always had those bottom lines up to protect myself, because I know how easily I can spiral. I have never paid for a lap dance. I've never paid for a prostitute. Like I've always, stayed away from many of these vices. Zev says, this is grotesque if, my rabbis are lying to me. Well, my rabbis are like fathers to me. I'm not saying they're lying to you. They're just stretching the truth for what they think is a Torah end. They, generally speaking, the more traditional rabbis do feel that it's okay to stretch the truth if you're doing it for a good cause. Shoshana says, I had a Haredi woman in New York married, tell me it's a small sin to have sex with a married woman. Generally speaking, in Orthodox Judaism, adultery is regarded as a very big deal. Though, of course, individual Orthodox Jews will try to get away with it. So it says, you mean to say they are filling our heads, these ultra-Orthodox rabbis, with propaganda and lies? Let's just say that they have other values that are higher than truth. That's how I'd put it. Such as getting you to be Torah observant, to lead a Torah life. These are more important values than truth. Like the people of Israel in the Bible are called to be a nation of priests and a holy people. They're not called to be a nation of historians. So truth, generally speaking, in traditional Orthodox Judaism has only an instrumental value. That says, have I had altered states of consciousness? Well, I did do Kundalini yoga, so I certainly experienced, I guess, some altered states of consciousness. But generally speaking, I've stayed away from those kind of mystical highs. I like to stay in reality. And okay, so it's a great chat room here. And Shoshana says, hey, why are you people in the chat room not relating to Luke? This is his show. And so says, we are like Luke, we are narcissistic, but we're listening attentively and watching Luke's broadcast from start to finish. So much of the psychiatric community and therapeutic community will say there's no cure for narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder. There's certainly no medication for narcissistic personality disorder. But I believe that you can get significant help for narcissistic personality disorder, and I believe that I have experienced significant relief from this disorder through working the 12 steps, through doing the kind of thorough moral inventory that I was talking about earlier in this show. Like when I spend time with my sponsor going over 70 different harms that I've done others, and how seeing they kept fitting into certain patterns of, I just wanted to get my rocks off, or I just wanted attention. And so I just wanted to follow my passions, and I ignored normal ethical boundaries. And I see myself doing that again and again and again. It's very sobering. It's very humbling. And you don't come out of that experience and then start abusing people. It kind of brings you back to reality. And it's a step, it's another step towards some freedom from narcissistic personality disorder. So it's only a day at a time. Of course, you can ignore this work and say, okay, I've done enough. and then you're very well likely to spiral back into attention seeking and wanting other people to tell you who you are, and just constantly demanding the other people mirror what you're saying so that you can find out who you are by their feedback. But that exhausts people. It's not a good route to human connection. So James says, I'm glad I don't have any serious addiction. Okay, so I'd ask you, people who are glad they don't have any serious addiction, do you have any addiction to hiding? Like if you're poor, for example, if you're economically poor, in all likelihood, you have an addiction to hiding and biting. Like what happens to wounded animals? They want to go hide in a cave. What happens if you go to a wounded dog and try to pull it out of its hole, out of its cave? It will bite you. So about half the population are wounded, kind of like me. Like I grew up in foster care. My mother died of cancer before I was 4. And so to deal with those wounds, I've spent much of my life in hiding or in biting people. So there are a lot of programs that deal with this. And someone who believes in the 12 steps, I'm not going to identify with any particular program that I'm in. I've referenced all sorts of programs. Like I referenced the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's my main spiritual text. But I'm not an alcoholic. So I listen to lectures from Cocaine Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. Like AA is like the granddaddy of all 12-step programs. It's the mothership. So I'm gonna just read you symptoms of under-owning. That's from Under-Owners Anonymous. Time indifference. We put off what must be done and do not use our time to support our own vision and further our own goals. Now think about that. Like when I've had goals, I haven't seemed to suffer from this symptom. But then when I think about when I've had goals, very rarely have they been goals that were actually economically sustainable. They were fantasy goals. I was working towards an end that simply was not going to pay the bills. So even though I kept very busy working towards this goal, it was never going to pay the bills. So I was not using my time to support a vision that could possibly work. Another symptom of under-owning is idea deflection. Do you compulsively reject ideas that could expand your life or career and increase your profitability? I know I have, because I was so insecure in myself. Much of the time, I just couldn't hear ideas from other people. I couldn't allow them to affect me because I had such a shaky sense of self. Third symptom, compulsive need to prove. Although we have demonstrated competence in our jobs or business, we are driven by a need to reprove our worth and value. Wow. I mean, this one really hits me. Like I've always wanted to prove that I'm a great person because I felt like so crappy inside. So I was always trying to prove things, and that's exhausting to be around someone who's always trying to prove things. Also, a person who's always trying to prove things is going to take shortcuts. Clinging to useless possessions. We hold on to possessions that no longer serve our needs, such as threadbare clothing or broken appliances. Now, do you do that? Do you have stuff in your closet that you don't need? Do you have clothes that you don't wear? Do you have, I don't know, a storage locker filled with junk? Could you sell, give away, get rid of, throw out stuff that you don't need so that you'll feel cleaner and lighter? Exhaustion. We habitually overwork. We become exhausted, then underwork or cease work completely. I mean, yeah, that's me. In early February of 1988, I was taking 27 units of college, and I was working 30 to 40 hours a week. I was just like going at it basically from 4 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. And then I just collapsed. I just had this bad flu that never went away. I was basically bedridden for 6 years with chronic fatigue syndrome. So I went from peak exhaustion for years to absolute collapse for years. What about the symptom of giving away our time? We compulsively volunteer for various causes or give away our services without charge, and there's no clear benefit. Do you ever give away your time? Are you a compulsive volunteer? Do you give away your services at no charge, and there's no clear benefit? What about undervaluing and underpricing? Do you undervalue your abilities and services? Do you fear asking for increases in compensation or for what the market will bear? For example, I have never asked for a raise in my life. Now, this symptom hits me. I've never asked for a raise in my life. 8, isolation. We choose to work alone when it might serve us much better to have co-workers, associates, or employees. Yeah, that certainly hits me. I was thrown out of this acting school in, I think, 1995, and the director of the school said, "I think you're better suited for solitary endeavors." Otherwise, he was saying other people didn't think that I played nicely. What about physical ailments? Sometimes out of fear of being large or exposed, we experience physical ailments. Now, you might sign up for an acting class, but every time that class rolls around, you get sick. And then when class is over, you miraculously recover. Now, you might sign up to do a stand-up comedy class or a ballroom dancing class. Or if you're always getting sick before major opportunities, perhaps you're using physical ailments to stay isolated and to hide your talents and abilities. What about misplaced guilt or shame? Do you feel uneasy when asking for or being given what you need or what you are owed? Or not following up? Do you not follow up on opportunities, leads, or jobs that could be profitable? You begin many projects and tasks, but often do not complete them. Again, this is a symptom of an emotional addiction, an addiction to poverty and to hiding and to biting. Then stability, boredom. You create unnecessary conflict with coworkers, supervisors, and clients, generating problems that result in financial distress. That's another symptom of the emotional addiction to poverty and to hiding and to leading a very small life. Hey, Shoshana, it's great to have you here. James says, Luke, what's your greatest childhood memory? It's something that makes you feel so good thinking about. Absolutely. This isn't just my greatest childhood memory. This is like my happiest memory ever. So I was 11 years old. We'd moved to the United States in the summer of 1977. I was now starting 6th grade. And there wasn't any Google back then, so the classmates couldn't Google me and realize I was a loser. Like, I was brand new in the community from Australia. They liked my accent. And the most beautiful girl in the class, her name was Cindy. She was tall and brunette, and she'd wear lip smacker, like the strawberry lip smacker and banana lip smacker. Like, the lips smelled fantastic, and they were just so shiny and red. And one day, early in school, she walked by my desk and she dropped a note on it, and it said, "Will you go with me?" I don't think I've ever experienced such intense emotion. I couldn't believe that the most beautiful woman in the class was interested in me. So that's my favorite memory. It's also very painful because I couldn't handle it. I didn't know what to do. I was drunk. I couldn't talk about it with my parents. My parents would have absolutely forbade any kind of relationship with a girl. My dad used to march around and like break up my brother's relationships. When my brother was 14 or 15 and got a girlfriend, my dad would march over to her house and like break up the relationship. He'd also march around Avondale College in Australia, and he'd break up any mixed race relationship because he held it was sinful and against the Bible's teachings. So I was 11 in 6th grade. There's no way I could have talked to my parents about having a relationship, and I wasn't connected enough with any other guy in the school that I could talk about. There's no one I could talk about it with, so I didn't know what to do. So what did I do? I would just mock this girl. I would just tease her. I just made her life miserable. Oh, and then eventually I got sober and I asked her to go with me. I dropped her a note on her desk, and she said, "No way." I totally blew it. So how old am I? I am 51 years old. That says, speak of adultery and wife swapping in the Orthodox Jewish community. It's very, very rare, but from what I know, but I'm sure it does occur. Shoshana says, I've had two married guys in Pico try to hit on me. Wow. Oh, maybe it's not as rare. Uh, like, Orthodox Judaism stands for sexual self-control, and the, most of the people I admire most are Orthodox Jews, and they lead lives of self-control. They're married, they have kids. I don't think they screw around. But of course, people always surprise you. Like people I've admired, yeah, in Orthodox Judaism, yeah, I did find out they were, hitting on women who were not their wives. And so I just had to take those qualities that I admired in them and still admire them for their good qualities, and try to be understanding and realistic that they also had bad qualities. I remember Rabbi Mark Gaffney. I'd written all these critical articles about him for years. He seemed to like bounce from like sexual scandal to sexual scandal, and I met him finally in 2008, and he said, "I get the feeling reading your stuff that someone abused their religious authority against you when you were young, and you're just enraged at anyone who seems to be abusing religious authority." And so yeah, I guess I have a resentment against people who abuse their religious authority. I was just kind of, my dad has a PhD in rhetoric. Okay, so he's very good at framing arguments and making arguments and just like squashing, someone that he's arguing with. And I've noticed that in many religious leaders, that they kind of use their authority to squash opposition in a dishonest way. And yeah, that does enrage me when I see people getting squashed by the illegitimate and unethical use of religious authority. Wow, so specifically in Pico Robertson, well, in Pico Robertson, it's interesting. It's kind of a modern Orthodox stronghold. So one thing I notice about Orthodox Jews is that while most tend towards traditional Jewish perspectives on sexual restraint, there are a significant number who have sex lives that are as adventurous as the Goyim or more adventurous, even while still going to Orthodox shuls. So when I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, sexual sins were regarded as the worst sins. And I don't think I even knew of a case of adultery when I was growing up at Avondale College, and then my first few years at Pacific Union College. So it was either very well hidden or very rare. So like sexual restraint was perhaps the number one value of being a conservative Christian. That's what I remember from my conservative Christian upbringing. But in swaths of Orthodox Judaism, you have these people who go to Orthodox shuls and who keep kosher, show up in shul, but the sex lives are just off the hook. So yeah, married men who will hit on people like Shoshana, Orthodox men who will go to strip clubs and get arrested for soliciting prostitutes. We had a rabbi at a large synagogue in Pico Robertson who was arrested for soliciting prostitutes, and he retained his pulpitship, his rabbi role at the synagogue for many, many years. Even after the arrest, and even after it was widely known that he'd been arrested for soliciting prostitutes, and after it was widely known that he was a sex addict and out of control. We had Rabbi Abner Weiss at Beth Jacob, who was carrying on multiple sexual liaisons with female members of the congregation, sometimes in his office. closed door, locked door, office. No one could look in, and he'd just carry on. And he'd also have these liaisons with women that he would counsel. He became, he is a licensed therapist. So yeah, Orthodox Judaism has had a large number of scandals, and in a portion of Orthodox Judaism, like outwardly they lead Orthodox Jewish lives, but the sex lives are even more off the hook than the Goyim. Like you'll meet the Orthodox Jewish businessman who wants you to know that he's tapping his shiksa secretary. Wants you to know that. Zed says, for those who have suffered at the hands of narcissists, there are a number of psychologists on YouTube who offer insight and practical solutions to overcome the harm they may have caused you. Absolutely. Wow. Zed says, my husband just had the red pill on the Talmud. He's been freaked out all week, divorced for refusal to anal sex. I remember there was a rabbi in Los Angeles who gave in to the wishes of his congregation and agreed to give his class on whether or not anal sex is permitted in Orthodox Judaism. And when people showed up at the home where this class was taking place, there was a big sign at the front door saying, please use the back door to enter the home for this class. So there are different perspectives within Orthodox Judaism on whether or not anal sex is permitted, and whether if you do it, you're certainly not encouraged to not allowed, I believe, to finish there. But Maimonides said that a man can do anything sexually with his wife, but other rabbis are more more restrictive. Wow, James says, I dated for 6 years a girl that was narcissistic and she had borderline personality disorder. Okay, that's not just about her. That's just something about you, that you would get in. We can only be in relationships with people who are equally damaged as ourselves. It's not like, we're up here and then our partner is just so damaged and so messed up. Because any healthy person cannot stand to be with someone who's not healthy. So whoever our partners are, they are a reflection of who we are. And developing differentiation. And I'm referring to the great book by David Schnock, Passionate Marriage. Developing differentiation, the ability to stand on your own 2 feet while also trying to maintain relationships with the people most important to you. That's very, very difficult to build. But until then, we can only ever have relationships with people who are on the same level of differentiation. And differentiation tends not to change generation after generation. It tends not to change between members of a family. You tend to be at the same level of differentiation as your siblings, as your parents, as your children. Orthodox rabbis claim that people who do not accept Judaism do it because they do not want to live in a restricted lifestyle. I'm sure that's part of the reason. Other people just think it's that it contains a lot of lies, and they don't want to live in a community that puts the sacred label on lies and manipulation. Do I criticize support groups? No way. I think support groups can be wonderful, but for me, I think real transformation comes from doing the work that I was talking about earlier in the video, coming to terms with your resentments and getting clear about the role that you played and getting clear about which of your character defects, has caused you to, go over boundary and to ignore basic ethical rules. Chris says, Luke, what are your current goals? I just want to save the white race. and I'd like to get married. I'd like to have children. Shoshana says, Luke, you still have a shaky sense of self. You seem quite sure of yourself. I think I've made some progress from 10 years of psychotherapy, a little bit of help, but mainly from intensive 12-step programs and doing the work that I discussed earlier in this video. Jane says, I kind of hide. I was dyslexic. When I was 17 years old, I had a 4th grade reading level. It was very traumatic. Always felt stupid. It still affects me today, but I can read now. Wow, that is traumatic. And I bet you have some, likely ingrained habits of hiding and possibly biting others when they try to bring you out of your cave. So you may want to look into a 12-step program, something like Al-Anon, which is literally for people who have alcoholics and drug addicts in their lives, but it's really the best program for learning to get along with others, or a program like Dead Anonymous, Under Anonymous, or one of the relationship programs such as Codependence Anonymous or Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. If AA is the most effective program, which ones are the worst? I didn't say AA is the most effective. I said it's the mothership. It's the first program, and all others come from it. So there's tremendous wisdom from AA because it's also the biggest program. So I don't know of any bad 12-step programs. There's no reason you should feel incapable or inferior. You most likely had amazing skills or overlooked because of this distraction of dyslexia. Yeah, that's the great thing about 12-step programs, is that they inculcate in you an understanding that no one is better than you and no one is worse than you. And so that enables you to connect with people. Because throughout my life, I was always ping-ponging between thinking I was better than other people or that I was worse than other people. And when I realized that I'm the same as other people, then you have the possibility of genuine human connection. And James says, my therapist says my experience of dyslexia caused post-traumatic stress. That says, I was raised to believe I should be the best at everything and rule the world from the age of 2. Okay, that's, on one hand, that sounds empowering. On the other hand, you might have developed the museum state of, I have to take care of everyone else and put their needs before mine. Richard says, Luke, I'm extra attracted to mentally ill girls. Is that a problem? Yeah, I think it's a problem. It reflects something broken in you because you feel secure around someone who seems far more broken than yourself. I remember at my church when I was a kid, my dad had this church, and this family that would look after all these mentally retarded girls. Would bring them to church, and so there'd be about 40 of these mentally retarded girls, and many of them just loved me. They absolutely adored me. I don't know what it is, but mentally retarded girls adore me. And please, I've never gone there. I've never touched. I've never done it. Cross boundaries. Never dated. Never preyed upon. Anyone who was retarded. Yeah, I understand you're not being sarcastic. I understand the appeal, why you're extra attracted to mentally ill girls, because you feel more powerful and less threatened and, more in control. Old media team room. Difficult as a scholar to deal with ordinary folk. Not saying I'm better, but different. Yeah. Well, it's very hard. It's very, very difficult to talk to people who are more than one standard deviation of IQ below you or above you. Okay, so my IQ is in the 120s. It's not particularly high, but I'm maybe like 2 standard deviations above the normal. So I can have, I can converse with people from like 110 IQ up to like 160. Like I can talk to have beneficial conversations and feel comfortable in that range, like lower than 110 or probably higher than 160. It becomes a little more difficult. Richard says, Luke, how can I become less broken? A 12-step program, man, like Al-Anon, or Codependence Anonymous, or Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. Like, which of your emotional addictions, will kill you first? Like, are you addicted to poverty, or to debting? Something like Debtors Anonymous, or Underowners Anonymous, or Al-Anon, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, or if you have a substance issue, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Marijuana Anonymous. M. Gray says, I used to pick abusive men. Now I'm just alone. It's better to be safe. Okay, but that's not recovery. Like, hiding out in the cave is not recovery. That's just hiding out from one's own broken picker. And the reason you pick abusive men is because it relates to abuse that you suffered in early childhood, and you're trying to heal that abuse by recreating it and then hoping to transcend it and transform it. But there aren't many people that you can date that can give you that emotional corrective experience. And so normally you have to seek out help, a good therapist. And they're often very inexpensive therapy centers for people who are, getting in their hours to become licensed therapists. And then a good 12-step program to do the deep character work that I was talking about earlier in the show. Richard says, I'm very high IQ and I feel like normal people can never understand me, which is frustrating. Yeah, well, I don't think we should expect to be understood by people who are more than 1 or 2 standard deviations away from us in IQ. But Richard, do you ever feel more than or less than other people? Because that will really mess you up. Like, I had that lifelong problem. When I'd meet someone, I always think, am I more than that person or am I less than that person? And that inhibited the growth of genuine human connection. So if you bounce between feeling more than or less than other people, then you may want to look into a 12-step program. Okay, so why anonymous programs versus therapy? I just found 12-step programs transformational, far more than therapy, because 12-step programs forces you to confront your character defects and within a community, and you listen to other people tell their story and you tell your story. So you identify, you connect, and you do this deep soul transforming work that I was discussing earlier in the show. So for me, 12-step programs transform my life. Therapy reduced my self-destructive tendencies a little bit, but it didn't transform my life. So the real soul work, happens in a 12-step program. Therapy, just look at the studies. It's not terribly effective. It's mildly effective, but 12-step programs, if you go and you do the 12 steps, they will change your life, guaranteed. And I want to talk about the 9-step promises. So all these promises lie on the other side of the 9th step, and the 9th step is when you make amends. Okay, so 8th step, you become willing to make amends. 9th step, you make amends to all the people you've harmed. And it's only after you've done that that you can receive the benefit of the promises of the 12-step program. So if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, meaning the first 9 steps, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we do the work. This is from page 83, 84 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Fiji wants to know how many porn stars did I get the hat. No, I never got any sexually transmitted disease in my whole life. M. Gray says, I don't remember any physical abuse, probably witnessed it though. Yeah, there's a lot of abuse that's not physical. Like if you were beaten down emotionally, you know, if you were teased and just reduced in your humanity, that could have been a kind of traumatic event in early childhood that now you seek to recreate through. You've sought to recreate through your relationship so that you can go back, experience that trauma, but try to transform and heal it. But that very rarely happens. No, I'm not going to mention what 12-step program I'm in. That's against the rules. I don't speak for any particular 12-step program. So, okay, so great chatting with you guys. Let's do it again. Send me an email, lukeisback@gmail.com, or hit me up on Twitter. My handle is Luke Ford on Twitter, or my YouTube channel is youtube.com/LukeIsback. And look forward to hearing from you. And I'll chat with you guys later. Bye-bye.